Eternal Word Television Studios in Birmingham, Alabama.
Love, the compassion of Jesus. The most glorious work of all, to praise God in His kingdom. Moved by the Spirit, one who lives in love lives in God, and God lives in him. What a wonderful thing is our church. This whole network is built on trust. The essence of evangelization is to tell everybody Jesus loves you. We're all called to be great saints. Don't miss the opportunity. Well, hi, fam. We just got so many of our family members here tonight from just about everywhere. I just want to tell you a little bit about something. Last Thursday morning, Bill and I and Sister Mary went to Mexico. And we want to get our network into Mexico. And I think we are going to do just that. Otherwise, there are going to be some, I think, other wonderful developments later on that I can't share now because it hasn't come about. But I just want to tell you where I went. I went to a Franciscan church built in 1530. And on the outside, it was a kind of, it looked like it was falling apart, you know. So there were big holes in the concrete in the patio part. And I said, how old is this church? It's 1530. I thought, whew. I can't even remember that far back. You know, you can't. I don't even have my history that far back. See? Well, I walked in that church. And if I didn't know better, I thought it was brand new. I never saw such a church. It had, the altar was not just an altar, but the back of the altar went almost up to the ceiling. All hand-carved wood. And on that wood was layers and layers, but you couldn't see it, so much gold that I thought it was metal. Did you ever see so much layers of gold that it looked like metal? And I went, I'm so accustomed to these gymnasiums that they're building in America that I was flabbergasted, see? I went from, it had St. Anthony, St. Paschal, St. Francis, Holy Mother Clare, one altar after another. When I looked at the main altar, it was such carving that I couldn't get over it. And then we went to a side chapel for Mass. Well, and you know what amazed me was that floor, you could have eaten off that floor. And the altar cloth was just looked like it had been just starched. And I never in my life saw that many flowers. You know how expensive gardenias are? They had bowls of gardenias everywhere. There was a bowl here and a bowl there, and I looked at it. Where did they get all these gardenias? And then they had white roses and yellow roses. I was in one church. I mean, there's no florist in the whole world that had as many flowers as in that one church. So we went into this side chapel, and the entire chapel was gold. I thought I walked into Fort Knox. And beautifully hand carved. I You know, we fight so hard in America just to keep our churches. And when I saw that, and the people would come in and they'd genuflect and they'd kiss the floor. I never saw such devotion in my whole life. Not only was there devotion in that church, but it was kept so immaculate and so clean that I thought, somebody here loves the church. So then we went to dinner, and the next day we went to the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Well, if you ever have an opportunity, I would make a trip to Our Lady Guadalupe. The church looks kind of modern on the outside, but when you get in, I saw women carrying their babies, walking on their knees from the entrance up to the altar. And I walked down, and they have, I think, about 5 or 6 people walkers. You know, you get on and it moves. But they walked very slow, and but they had one that was locked, so it didn't move. So I was able to just stand there. I dedicated this network again, because I already dedicated it to Our Lady Guadalupe in '82. So there we were in '94, we dedicated the network. I prayed for every one of you. I prayed for our entire family, our entire audience. I asked the Lord, Our Lady, to bless you. I prayed for the new shortwave, that it's successful. I prayed for the orders. It's such a phenomenon. I asked one of the bishops after we had lunch with, and I said, how tall was Our Lady? And he said, 5'6". That's the image, you know. In case some of you don't know what Our Lady Guadalupe is, this poor man, Juan Diego, it's a kind of long story, so I'm going to shorten it up for you. Our Lady appeared to him and said, go tell the bishop that I want a church built here. That poor guy, you know, he was really a peasant, and he went and told the bishop, but bishops haven't changed much these years either. And the bishop said to him, I don't believe you, you know, that's ridiculous. So then our dear Lord, our dear Lady said, when he went back and he said, I told you that I'm going to pay attention to me. I'm ignorant. Why don't you pick somebody smart? He didn't say that, but that's what he meant. And Our Lady said, no, I want you to go. So he goes back again. Well, the bishop looked at him, and he said, she wants a church, yeah? Okay. He said, give me a sign. So one day I went back, and Our Lady said, all right, now this is winter, December 12th. And she said, go on top the hill and pick the roses. And she went with him, and he picked the roses, and he handed them to her, and they were beautiful roses of all kinds of colors. And that was impossible that time of year. So she arranged those roses in his tilma. You know, the tilma was a piece of cloth, like a scapular, like I have, but it's very long. And what they do, they tie the ends here, and then they would take the scapular, the tilma, and they would pull it up, and they used it like for a basket, you see. So she put all these roses, and she said, don't open them for anybody. Don't let anybody see what's in here, but just go to the bishop. Well, he had a hard time getting to the bishop. You know, the servants were trying to open the tilma. He had a hard time. So the man walked in, very simple, and he said, here is your sign. So he opened his tilma, and all the roses fell out. And the bishop went to his knees, because on the tilma was this magnificent portrait of Our Lady. And this poor man didn't know it was there. You know, he wondered what that bishop kneeling down for. And when he looked down, he saw this portrait of Our Lady. Well, there was a little church, big, a Tibiac. And they built this little church, and then through the years they built a big basilica, and it began to sink on one side, so now they built a brand new one. And that picture looks, when you come in, like it's just above the altar, but there's quite a separation when you go down and see it. We were very fortunate to have some wonderful, wonderful devotional people that brought us there and paid for everything. But I was just amazed at their devotion, you know, totally dedicated to the Lord. I was so impressed, and we had a Mass, the bishop said the Mass, and all the employees of this man who brought us there at the offertory, this was amazing. At the offertory, they each had a rose, yellow roses, red roses, and they walked up in pairs and they put all their roses before the altar at a great big gold urn. I was amazed. And the most wonderful thing that happened was that the Holy Father wrote a letter, a quite lengthy letter, giving us all his blessing to go into Mexico. If we get it translated, one day read it to you. The Holy Father is so happy that EWTN, Espanol, is going into Mexico. And I guess when we went from church to church, I saw flowers everywhere. And they gave me a choice of churches. And I'm going to tell you this because I was petrified. And you'll get a big laugh out of it. I don't mind being laughed at either. The priest that was so good to us and so kind, he said to you, we have 3 churches now you can go to. My church, which is the very top of the mountain. San Juan Diego, or the little flower church. Well, he was so kind and sweet to us. I said, I'll go to your church. What I didn't realize was there were umpteen steps. Then there'd be a landing and more steps and another landing and more steps. So I looked at that and I said, Jesus, I opened my mouth. Now you got to help me get up there. Well, let me tell you, they decided that they would carry me up. Said, what? I said, in what? They said, a chair. I am not going up those steps, sitting in a chair while you carry it up. He said, oh, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not. Well, 4 men looking at me in the eye said, oh, yes, you are. So I, okay. Well, there was nobody around but us. So I got in this chair. It was just a nice, comfortable little chair with, I think it was leather. I don't remember any arms on it. And so I took a deep breath. And you have to realize the air is very thin on top of these mountains. Well, I didn't want my 170 pounds to give them a rupture, you know? But they went up. And I can understand why Pope John the 23rd, you know, popes used to sit in these big sedelias. And at the end, when they had his coronation, he gave all those who carried him a raise. And I could understand why they needed a raise. But these men carried me up all those steps. Well, I was so glad to get to the top, and I asked the Lord, please bless him, and please don't make him get a rupture. Well, it did me good because that too was faith you know what I'm saying? If you saw a nun was handicapped, and I think most of us would say, well, sorry, sweetheart, wait for me here. But these men had a kind of devotion that was undaunted. See, there were no obstacles to them. Well, we had a beautiful Mass, and on the way out I saw what looked like a wedding. But the girl was very small. She was dressed in a very beautiful dress. And there were about 5 or 6 young boys, teenagers, and one little tight, about that big, dressed in tuxedos. I mean, real spiffy tuxedos with satin lapels, you know? And I thought, what is this? Well, it's a Mexican tradition that when a girl reaches 15, she goes to the church, and there were flowers everywhere. At every other pew, there was a bouquet of flowers. And when she gets 15, she goes to the chapel, she thanks God for her 15 years, and then she's entered into society. Well, one of them came up and said, Benedizione, benedizione. I said, okay, I'll just make sign the cross on your head. Well, by the time I did that to one, there were 20 people there, you see. And I thought, well, thank you, Jesus, you know. Another act of devotion, you see. And this is a custom that's been in Mexico for years and years and years. So I was so happy because as I prayed for them, they went in the chapel, and see, though the whole outside was clear except for us. And I said to Emilio, I said, yeah, could I convince you to forget going down? He said, nope. Okay. So I sat in a chair. Well, it's one thing going up and quite another thing coming down. And they were huffing and puffing, and you know, if you're going up, you're okay, but when you go down, you're kind of this way. And so I started saying the Ave Maria in Latin, the Pater Noster in Latin, and the Gloria Patri in Latin. Well, everybody around me was hysterical, see? And the men would have been hysterical, except they were carrying all this weight down the steps. Well, when I got down the steps, there was a Cinderella carriage. I looked at that and I said, what is that? And they said, this is when the girl's all done, and all the prayers have been said, she will come down and she rides through the city in a carriage, very similar to a carriage you would have seen in Cinderella movie, you remember? Kind of made like this way. So they had the one step down, so I sat in it. And it looked like a big pumpkin, and I added to the pumpkin. And had my picture taken. And that was, but I thought, what a wonderful thing. You know, in so many areas in the United States, they have debutante parties. They're very worldly, most of them, I think. But this was a total spiritual thing. You see, this girl had reached 15. She was presented first to the Lord. And I never saw such devotion, such love. It's you know, when I saw it last, and this is not a criticism, it's just a kind of memory of the old Italian festivals. Where the girls would dress up in Italian costumes and on St. Anthony's Day, and we really celebrated the feast with joy and family, and we had fun, and they danced the tarantella, and you really celebrated with everything you had at the feast of a saint. And then you walked home. Somehow that kind of festival increased your faith. See? It increased your love. It's like you had somehow some invisible contact with God. A reminder, almost a daily reminder of the love of Jesus. Well, I'm sure the girl had gone through the city, And now she starts life. But it was blessed by God first. See? I wondered if tonight we couldn't talk about devotion. And one of our family in the audience said, why don't we talk about suffering? We'll do both. We got lots of time. But everywhere I went, the next day I went to a little flower church, and it was white and gold. Pure white and gold everywhere. Flowers everywhere. And you know, it depicted, number one, the presence of God. Tabernacles were very visible, with flowers all around and all kinds of candles. And I wondered why a persecuted church, at least until recently, thrived so beautifully, you know? And we would so much seem to be dying out, you know? Devotions are gone, and I was totally edified. I made a program, an hour program. I asked questions in English. I answered in English, and one of our employees is born in Mexico, answered in Spanish. But I was just so edified at that devotion. When we went to the Basilica and we saw the devotion, and that was everybody. It wasn't just old women, or it was everybody. The elderly, the middle-aged, little kids carrying little flowers up to Our Lady and putting them on the altar. They have a Mass on the hour, every hour. And that basilica is packed. Packed. I've never seen anything like it, at least for many, many, many years. And it just showed me, at least we've lost something very beautiful and very valuable when we gave up devotions. Because the people were at peace. You know, some of them very poor, but they were at peace. They had a kind of peaceful serenity that we wouldn't get otherwise, you know. I talked to there were two bishops we talked to, and the one bishop told me, and I'm trying to get him here at some point, he said the strange thing about this tilma is that once every, I think, 10 years, they open up the door and they have a select group of people who go and look at it, you know, face to face. He said he went up to the tilma like this. When you do that, all you see is the fiber. You don't see color. You don't see a picture. You see nothing. And the fiber is made out of cactus. Can you imagine the loose weave it is? He said, as soon as you back up, there's the picture. And it's a very strong picture with beautiful lines in it. And he said, you know, Mother, the amazing thing was, when I went around to the back, it was coal black from soot, from centuries of candle smoke, and almost wax on the back. And he said, in a loose weave, that should have come forward. See? You can't even see that there's any black soot in the back. Nothing. From the front, it's just as fresh and beautiful. After, what is it, 400 or 500 years? It's an amazing thing. Maybe the United States needs some of that Mexican devotion. Maybe we need a picture from Our Lady, you know? But Our Lady of Guadalupe is for all of us. And I just could not help but share with you the beauty of that shrine. If there's any remote possibility that you can go to Guadalupe, Mexico City, I go and sit there all day, and I would just absorb the wonder of the people who walk on their knees, who go there hour after hour, Mass after Mass. I remember seeing, I wanted to share with you. You mind? Because it was so beautiful. When I find that kind of love and devotion, I really have to share. It did my heart good. I hope someday you'll be able to go. You'll be surprised by the devotion in the smallest chapel to the largest chapel will do for you. Now we have a call. I don't know what we're going to have a call about, but hello.
Hello, my name is Todd.
Hi, where are you from?
Louisiana.
What is your question?
My question is, I was at work, I guess a couple of months ago, and there was a lady that came in, and she's a Christian lady, and we started talking about this and that, and we started talking about kids. And me and my wife don't have any kids yet, and we've been married about 7 years. And she said, throughout the conversation, towards the end, she says, look, she says, don't worry about kids. She says, I think that y'all are going to have a boy. And she says, you are to call him Nathaniel. And I thought, first of all, I don't like the name Nathaniel. I thought, you know, but if we had one, is this some kind of special message? You know, hey, I'll name him whatever I'm supposed to. You know, but I thought, can people really get that kind of message to someone who needs that message, or is that even anything to acknowledge? Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know. It would be very hard to judge the particular woman who said that. You know, she may have had discernment from the Lord. It may just maybe an idea that came to her mind. I know one thing, that people who haven't had children have come here, and it seems to be our specialty, you know. One woman didn't have any children for 9 years, and she had twins. And I think one of our employees, when we started here, didn't have any children. Now he's got 5, and he was married 11 years or something like that. I mean, it seems that, I'm going to put you, what is your name? Are you there yet? Todd, okay? Todd, we're going to put you and your wife on our altar. And watch out. I'm serious, because it always happens, you know. I don't know why, that of all things to be have a specialty, and it's that one. We have another call. Hello?
Good evening, Mother.
Good evening. What is your question?
Yes, first I'd like to say that your show should receive an Emmy Award because it's the best show on television today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, my question is, I have a friend who's Christian, and when I brag about how beautiful my church is, he says the church shouldn't be beautiful. It should be plain. It should have no statues because all that distracts you from God. What's the best way I could tell him he's wrong?
I really can't say what I want to say on the air. It sounds like a transcendentalist that is a nothing New Ager. I don't know. But if that were true, there'd be no beauty in the world. Because beauty is to lift the heart up to God. It'd be a terrible thing in the world if there were no waterfalls, no sun, no sunrise, no sunset. There wouldn't be people who with art that could make beautiful pictures and statues that could inspire you. It would be a terrible blah world if there were no flowers or no trees. There'd be no hills. If you're going somewhere and you see those hills, and you're going up and you see trees and wildflowers and rocks. It would be a terrible world if there were no beauty in men and women who smile, even in the midst of pain, who have courage to stand tall. There would be no beauty in the world at all if God not give us beauty. You see, we could all have been born in a giant desert, never known the difference. But God is beauty. And you're human. I feel sorry for that man. I suppose it's a man, may have been a woman. Whatever it is. But the purpose of statues and paintings is to uplift. God is not a sad God. He is a glorious God. You cannot read the book of Revelations without seeing the beauty of heaven. Do you think heaven's going to be one blah place where this particular individual can meditate on God? God himself is absolute beauty. Absolute beauty. And all beauty comes from him. Let me read this little thing, see if it would distract your friend. The person sitting on the throne and looked like a diamond and ruby. Wouldn't that be distracting? And there was a rainbow encircling the throne, and this looked like an emerald. And round the throne in the circle were 24 elders, 24 thrones, and on them sat 24 elders sitting dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. And flashes of lightning were coming from the throne and peals of thunder. And in front of the throne were 7 flaming lamps burning, the 7 spirits of God. I don't know where that poor individual is going to go if he doesn't like beauty. You see, without beauty, we cannot live. See, if there was no sunrise, no sunset, and then the beauty that God created from the hands of men. When I went to these churches, I thought, what kind of hands carved and set gold on these things? I asked the man I was with, the couple I was with, do these people still exist that do this stuff? He said, oh yeah. I said, can I have one? He said, well, I'll send them to you. I said, I have a little thing on back that holds the monstrance. And there was a little slight thing of gold leaf on it, but I said, it doesn't look like this stuff. He said, well, I'll send him down. Well, when I get through with that little thing that's holding up the monstrance, your eyes are going to glitter. Because I want to depict on that altar the beauty and the glory of the Blessed Sacrament. And sometimes I say to the Lord, Lord, I wish I had diamonds and rubies, and I would put them all over that monstrance, and I would like them to shine so bright that everybody would have to put their head down for a minute so their eyes would get accustomed to your beauty. Well, I don't have that kind of stuff. But if I want it, when the Lord looks at it, that's what he's going to see. Even if it isn't there, because it's in my heart. And so, don't ever give up beauty. If that's distracting, then where is that poor soul going to go to get close to God? We are not our own source of grace. We are not our own source of joy. We are not our own source of beauty. Only God is beautiful. So, it's a long way of telling you, don't worry about it. We have another call. Hello?
Hello.
And where are you from?
I'm from Rochester, New
And what
York.
is your question?
Yes, I was wondering how I can get more of a devotion to Our Lady. I'm a new convert, and I also have another question. My husband's black, and he's in the RCIA, and he wants to know how he can feel more welcome because he's black, and he feels there's racism in the church. Plus, I have a prayer request, if that's all right. My husband and I have a lot of problems, and we need healing in our marriage. Plus, my brother has AIDS, and he's dying, and my mother needs conversion, and so does my stepfather and brother.
Well, we'll pray for all those things. I don't know, really. I think prejudice is a terrible thing. And even if it's in the church, it's a terrible thing, you see. God made everyone beautiful, regardless of their skin. They're all daughters and sons of God. They're all brothers and sisters, see. So if your husband's listening, maybe that would be a comfort to him. You can develop devotion to Our Lady by first saying her rosary. I would get a little statue of Our Lady and put some flowers there. So, you're worshiping idols. Oh, come off, you're worshiping idols, for goodness sakes. You go to Washington, D.C., I never saw so many men on horses. Do you realize what a statue in marble means? To, first of all, carve a horse and then carve a man on top of a horse? Do you realize what it costs? And why does he do it? He's just sitting there on his horse. And nobody thinks a thing about it. Is that idolatry? So, oh no, he won the battle. Okay, he won the battle. Why put him in marble? Now, to me, if you put a saint in marble, at least that particular image reminds you that you too can become a saint. Reminds you of the love of Jesus, the grace that Jesus can put. It reminds you why he died for you. He died to make you holy. So don't pay attention to this. You know, we need him. I have never met a man yet that began to talk about his family. And I'd say, do you have a picture? And he comes up with so dilapidated billfolds that he must have had 35 years, all worn out. But in that worn out billfold, he has a picture of his wife and his kids, and he is so proud. Is that idolatry? What happens when he opens up his billfold to pay for a lunch? He sees his children. What happens to him? The love he has becomes rekindled. Well, that's what it is with a Sacred Heart badge or a statue. I bought a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it's got real eyelashes on it. I never saw a statue with real eyelashes on it. But I gave it to one of the sisters to look at. She said, that's got real eyelashes. I said, where? By golly, with real eyelashes. Emilio bought me this rosary. You see it? It is sweet. It's got a picture of every incident in the life of Juan Diego when he saw Our Lady. See? Now over here, I'm sorry you can't put your eyes on this thing, but then if I look through here, there is the image of Guadalupe. I see the whole image of this little teeny little thing. Well, I love this rosary. Why? It's a constant reminder that our dear Lady loved this continent so much. It's the only real picture of her self-portrait in the world. I like that. Not in Germany or France or Italy. It's nowhere but right here. They said, well, it's in Mexico. Well, we're brothers and sisters. Don't matter where it is in this continent. We all live in the same one. You need devotion. I feel like there's something missing if I can't put my hand in my pocket and feel a rosary, because I keep giving them away. And that's why I keep getting new ones. And the sister said, "Whether you keep this one?" I thought, well, I don't know if I keep it or not. But see, that's just all remind. We need it. We live in a rat race world, don't you think? Huh? You can't. You wake up in the morning and you're all cheerful. By nighttime, you look like you look like a wreck of the Hesperus. You're bedraggled. You got bags under your eyes. And what did you do all day? You went to work and you ate. You came home and you run out the door in the morning and you crawl in at night. Now you tell me in that situation how you're going to be pious or holy, or unless you have reminders. Reminders, little medals, little crucifixes. By the way, we have some of these small. Some of you have them on. Yeah, little monstrances. Well, I don't know what they are. What'd you pay for it? What'd you pay for yours? $3.50. $3.50. $3.50? You only paid $3.50. Got to be a prophet somewhere in there. Oh, well. Are we having fun? Yeah. Okay, we have another call. Hello?
Mother?
Where are you from?
Des Moines?
Good morning. Huh? Oh,
Yeah.
Des Moines.
Yeah.
I thought you said good morning. I thought.
No. I could have said buenos dias.
Okay, what is your question?
Well, actually, when you started talking about Guadalupe,
Yeah.
that instantly brought back memories of when I was in Mexico in '86.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the summer right after the earthquake.
Oh, yeah.
And when I went into that basilica, I expected to see damage from the earthquakes. Not a flake of gold was out of place, not a crack in the wood. The frame that holds Juan Diego's tilma was not damaged one bit.
No.
A miracle. I know I witnessed the miracle when I went in there.
Well,
and
the miracle
really
gave
a kicker to my faith, because at that time I was in Arkansas, and I had very little chances of going to church simply because I don't drive. But having studied that in Spanish, I have a bachelor's in Spanish.
Yeah.
When I went down there to see that, I got to see what I had been studying about, and that really...
It's a wonderful, wonderful portrait of Our Lady. It has a tremendous amount of symbolism, and you can't say enough. When the bishop comes in August, we'll talk a lot more about Our Lady, and there is a presence there. You know, it's an unusual thing. When you pass by Our Lady's portrait there, there's a real, you get a sense of the presence of Our Lady. And and that's why statues and pictures and portraits and paintings. If you go to Sistine Chapel in Italy, it's unbelievable, and it's the whole story of creation. So not only is your love enhanced by beauty, but it's a story. You see, it's a story that you can sit there and read. We have another call. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
And what is your question for New Jersey? Boy, we got a lot of them here. What is your question?
You're such a delightful person.
Can you speak louder, please?
You're such a delightful person.
Thank you.
Mother, I just wanted to ask about, I happened to see, I'm changing the subject a little bit, but
Okay, we don't care.
Easter Sunday Mass, and there was a nun taking her final vows.
Sister Agnes?
Oh, what a beautiful nun. Mother, why are you laughing? She's
Well,
beautiful.
you're right.
She's a beautiful nun. And Mother, I looked at the way you were so proud of her. You smiled at her when she took her final vows. And when I went to work the next day, there were several people in the office who happened to catch your show and saw this beautiful Mass and this nun taking her final vows. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to ask, or I'm lucky I got you this evening because it's been on our minds and we're praying for the new sister and for you. What is her vocation like? Is she going to be a teacher, or what will she be doing? Will she ever be on a show with you?
I don't think. Sister and I belong to a cloistered community. We live in a specific space. We have woods that the sisters walk on. The sisters don't leave that space unless it's necessary, like going to doctor, dentist, buying shoes, whatever. It takes 8 years to take solemn vows. You're a postulant a year, you're a novice 2 years, and then you take vows, single vows. You say vows for every year for 5 years. So after that, our entire life, and what makes us a monastery is part that solemn vow. A solemn vow means that she makes a vow to live in poverty, in chastity, without property, in obedience, and in closure. So she takes 4 vows, and our life is geared entirely through or to the Blessed Sacrament. We have our dear Lord exposed, and all those people are here have been to Mass and they've been in the chapel. We have our dear Lord exposed every day from 6 to 9, sometimes 10, 4 nights a week, all night long. And we do that to give Him honor and glory, to thank Him for those who never thank Him for anything, to pray for the dying and those who have sudden deaths, for those who die in their sleep, for those who have accidents, for those who don't even know God, for those who hate God, for those even in the church who have strayed from the right path, strayed from the teachings of the church, strayed from the beauty of the church. That's her life. It will not change. It took 8 years to just say, I desire nothing but God. It means that sister cannot own anything, nor may she receive anything. She got a lot of little cards, and in each card was $5 or $10, and it went from the card to me to the bookkeeper. She'll never see it again. And she may never say, Mother, I would like to use this for that. She can never say that anymore. Everything she has belongs to the community. Everything. From her habit to the chair she sits on. Now, we're a monastery, we're not a convent. We're nuns, we're not sisters. And the difference is, number one, to be a monastery of women and to be a nun, you have to have solemn vows. You have to have enclosure, which means there's perimeters you cannot go beyond. It also means we have to say the divine office in public. So if you come in our chapel at 6 o'clock, 10 after 6, or 11, or 4:20, you're going to hear the sisters chant in public the psalms and the readings. That's what makes solemn vows. So that is her life. You see, Jesus is her life. And that's why, if you notice, she laid on the floor, and 4 nuns, 2 were candles. Looks like one of these things at church when people die, you know. We have 2 candles, 1 on each side, and 4 sisters with a pall. Knelt down and placed this entire pall on her while we said the long chant in Latin, Litany of the Saints. When the moment she rose, she made her vows. She was literally dead to the world. She cannot acquire anything. She cannot inherit anything. Everything she has belongs to the Lord. See? So I'm glad you enjoyed it. Someone called and wondered if the nun died. Because We had this pall on top of her, you know. But she didn't die. She died to herself, and she died to the world. And she is a beautiful nun. And everybody said, "Whoa, you could have got married." What does that mean, you could have got married? Any girl can get married, you know. Does that mean that God is not supposed to have beautiful spouses? That don't make any sense to me. You know, beauty comes from the heart. I like to see handsome priests and beautiful nuns. Well, we can't all have it, so. Beauty is in the heart. See? And even the most beautiful lose it as you get older. You ever notice that? And ugly people get more beautiful when they get older. It seems the opposite. I don't know. But I'll tell you what shines no matter who you are, what your face looks like. It doesn't matter. The beauty in your heart comes through your face. And that's what leads us all to God. We have another call. Hello?
Hello.
Where are you from?
I'm from Rye, New Hampshire.
And what is your question?
My question, Mother, is, well, first I would like to respond to the fellow who was wondering what to do about the fellow who didn't want statues or decorations in the churches. And my offering to you is that the Seventh Ecumenical Council is a wonderful response of the Church to this kind of question.
That's right.
And second, to give you my question, I'm not Catholic. I'm Russian Orthodox, but I often watch your program and your network, and I think it's wonderful. And in particular, I enjoy watching the services. There's a great deal of talk or hope that at some point the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church will be reunited someday.
Right.
We all hope that. But one thing that often takes me back when I watch these services is the way the people receive communion. In both of our churches, of course, there's a devotion to the presence of Christ in the Blessed Sacrament.
Right.
And I often, people seem to be very blasé about receiving. They come up and actually take it with their fingers, or there doesn't seem to be any cultivation or teaching of reverent way of receiving.
Well, we're running out of time, so I have to kind of jump in here. But when we began in the Western Church to receive communion in a hand, when the teaching of the true Church, the teaching that Jesus is truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist, when that was taught to our children, and is still taught to our children as a symbol, as temporary presence, whatever, then the whole devotion to the Eucharist went by the wayside. Priests have called me and said they found hosts in missalettes, under pews with bubble gum. I think it's a terrible, terrible thing that happened. And it's sad. You're right, it's sad. You see people come in church, they come in and they sit down. Just like here in our church, we have the Blessed Sacrament exposed. And one time a whole class of high schoolers came in, and they came in like cattle. They sat down, I said, hold it. Would you please move out and come in and genuflect on both knees? This is the presence of Jesus. Because once we get the realization of the real presence of Jesus, then we will receive him with great reverence. Our sisters kneel before they receive the Holy Eucharist, and they receive on the tongue. Some people complain about, well, we can't help that, you see, because this is Jesus. You can't treat him like he was just anybody. I want to remind you, my dear family and friends, that this network is brought to you by you. We're reaching summer months, and donations are already going down. So we need at least 100,000, and I don't expect any one of you to give 100,000. I wouldn't mind it. But Anyway, 100,000 of you listen, send in $1. 50,000 send 2, 20,000, 25,000 send 4. Anyway, be generous. I love you. Jesus loves you an awful lot. So we'll see you again tomorrow night. Bye.